welcome to Literary Prospects, where we talk to authors and literary professionals about books, publishing, and the writing life. I'm Kelley Vick. I'm the host of the program, and in just a moment, it will be my pleasure to introduce today's guest. But first, a reminder that if you like what you hear, please do take a moment to subscribe. It helps us out, and you can make sure you never miss an episode. Also, we've opened a Literary Prospects shop, so if you're looking for bookish shirts, totes, and gifts, please check that out at literaryprospects.etsy.com. And to grab books featured on the podcast and check out more curated book lists, you can visit the Literary Prospects bookstore on bookshop.org. We'll leave all those links below in the show notes. And now, let's introduce today's guest. Anna Rasche is an author, gemologist, and jewelry historian who's previously worked in the jewelry collection at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. She's a member of the teaching faculty at Sotheby's Institute of Art and has a master's degree in the history of design. The Stone Witch of Florence is Anna's debut novel and is based on research she conducted on the uses of gemstones in medieval medicine at the Cooper Hewitt Museum and on site in Italy. Anna lives in Brooklyn, New York, with her husband, daughter, and 2 cats. Anna Rasche, thank you so much for joining today, and congratulations on your shining debut novel, The Stone Witch of Florence. Author Katie Hayes says, magical in every sense of the word. Rasche's debut stole my heart. A feast of a novel. The Stone Witch of Florence is erudite, transportive, and addicting. It's that precious and rare type of story, the kind that makes you want to fly through its pages while simultaneously savoring every word. The Stone Witch of Florence is a gem. Author Lori Lico Albanese says, the Stone Witch of Florence sparkles with suspense and the magical power of women, an engaging and entrancing debut. And author Sarah Penner says, impeccably researched with vibrant prose, The Stone Witch of Florence is magnificent, a breathtaking debut. So with that, what can you tell us about The Stone Witch of Florence? How would you describe it?
So I would say it's historical fiction with a bit of fantasy and a bit of mystery and a really colorful medieval setting. It follows Ginevra di Gasparo, who has to draw on the ancient magic of gems to solve a series of crimes in Florence during the Black Death. Um, and she kind of is going through the city after most people have died or fled. So the characters that she meets who've still remained are an interesting lot. And they get up to some adventures throughout the town that were really fun to write.
What was the spark that got this story started for you?
So my profession is a gemologist, so I evaluate gemstones to determine what variety they are, how to value them, and I do this in the context of antique jewelry. So I was actually doing research on the uses of coral in Renaissance and medieval Italy, and I came across this whole category of medieval manuscripts called lapidaries, where they outline all the ways gemstones can be useful to people. So some of these are medical, and some of them are what we would definitely call magical today. And I just thought that was would be so interesting to explore kind of in a fictional context. So that was the spark. And I didn't stop thinking about it. So eventually it became a whole book.
You you did extensive research for the book, and you traveled to Italy for 3 months, right? Can you talk
Yeah.
about that?
Absolutely. So I think it was around 2014 when I first had this idea. And like I said, I just kept talking about it and talking about it. It was kind of my side project. And then my boyfriend at the time, now husband, was like, I think you should dedicate some more serious time to this. And you can go to Italy for 3 months on a tourist visa. So I was at a point in my career where I was ready to kind of switch jobs anyway. So I quit my job. He took a leave of absence from his, and we just very brokely went and bopped around Italy, and it was so fun. We, of course, spent a lot of time in Florence, and just kind of tracking down. My game was kind of to try and find things from the 14th century when this book takes place, because a lot, of course, has been remodeled, kind of covered up with later Renaissance and Baroque pieces, and remodels. So I would go hunting for places that still had visible these bits of the High Middle Ages, which are there, and they're fabulous. So Florence was a big place. I was also really inspired by a town called Orvieto, which is a medieval hilltop town, a little bit outside of Rome, and it's set on this big mound of tufa is the name of the rock, like the volcanic rock. And in the base of this tufa, ancient Etruscan tombs are carved. So there's just a lot of history kind of layered up on this hill. So it was really interesting for me to think about the connections to really ancient history that went through to the Middle Ages. And Orvieto was a place where it was kind of visualized. I don't want to go too into it for spoilers, but yeah, it was just fabulous. I'm so lucky um, to have been able to do that.
What is it about this particular place and time period, 14th century Italy, that fascinates you?
So I knew once I had this idea of kind of gem magic, of a person who can use the healing powers of gems, my brain just went to the first kind of wave of the Black Death, because what more dramatic of a background for somebody to test these powers against.
Mm.
And then my mind further went to Florence. I don't know why. I must have had to read the Decameron at some point in high school or college. And I remembered that it had been bad in Florence. So I just kind of said, okay, this is where the story would make sense. But beyond that, I feel like a lot of us probably have different time periods in history or places where we just feel some sort of special draw to them for whatever reason. And definitely the Middle Ages, any chance I have a time to be around art from that period or literature set in that period just really speaks to me as a fascinating time. So it was really special for me to be able, usually I'm doing research for other people, and the client is sort of dictating the time period that we're studying. So it was really wonderful to be able to just go fully into something because I was interested in it. So went down so many rabbit holes. And as a writer, you kind of have to pull yourself back from sometimes. I'm like, wow, I love this inventory list from 1353, but not everyone else will. So yeah. So I guess it was just a combination of this seemed historically to make sense, and then just having a personal interest in that time period.
How did you know when it was time to stop going? It sounds like there's so many interesting threads and rabbit holes to go down. How did you know when it was time to sort of wrap up the research portion and get to writing? Or were you doing both at the same time? How did that work for you?
I did both at the same time because I also, since I don't have this creative writing background, I'm totally learning as I'm going while I'm writing this. So the first draft was very long. Many rabbit holes were included that had to be later kind of filled up. But I for me the plotting was really helped by research because I knew where I wanted the story to end, but I wasn't quite sure exactly how I wanted it to get there. So when I came to a moment where I didn't know how I wanted to proceed, I would just start reading things that were interesting to me from this time period. And sure enough, there's like the wackiest stuff you'll ever see. And eventually you find something that just dovetails really nicely with the what you're imagining. So it was helpful in that sense. And then also you have to have good editors, right? So I had a little writing group that we've been meeting, I think since 2020, right? Because it started as an in-person course and then moved to Zoom. So we
Mhm.
started in early 2020. So these ladies are awesome and they'll be like, hey, maybe you don't need to include all of this. And you have to, I think yeah, it's so helpful to have readers that you trust kind of help guide you to where the good stuff really is and cut out the fluff.
Yeah. You mentioned that you're a gemologist, and a jewelry historian. You've worked in the jewelry collection at the Metropolitan Museum of
Hmm.
Art, and you teach jewelry history at the graduate level at
Hmm.
Sotheby's Institute of Art. It's so cool. How did you get into this field?
Yeah, it is a really wonderful field. I feel so lucky to be there. My undergrad major was archaeology. So I've always loved history and I thought I should do something more hands-on than just kind of study it. So that's why I did archaeology. But that was how I became interested in jewelry at all because actually, the Etruscans, whose tombs I mentioned earlier, were really, really fabulous goldsmiths. Like their work, they were pre-Roman people, and their work hasn't really been paralleled since. Just very, in my opinion, very intricate, beautiful designs. So I became fascinated in jewelry kind of as a medium for art. And I was like, well, I kind of want to learn to make that. So after I finished college, I went to school at Boston University. So as one does, you move to New York and you get your bartending job. And I was like taking little metalsmithing courses and I was totally fine at it. But from there, I needed something to pay the bills a bit more. So I took an entry-level job at a gemological laboratory where you're working, with microscopes and other types of refractometers, other types of equipment to determine what type of gemstone you're looking at, what quality it is it treated? And so that job really trained me on the technical aspects of gemology. And so then when I had this background, with the Gem ID and then kind of my archaeology background, I went to work in the estate jewelry field and kind of combined it all together. So that's how I ended up there. But I always say if somebody is looking for a career in art, I definitely encourage them to consider jewelry because there's jewelry shops everywhere. And it can be really tough to get a foot in the door, in kind of the places you think about. So I feel like I had a kind of like a side door entry to be able to work at these fabulous museums and with these beautiful pieces. So that's my off my soapbox now for that.
No, stay on it. What's the strangest piece of jewelry that you've come across? Is there one that sticks out?
Yeah, I mean, as a category, I don't think it's strange now, but it's really strange to our modern sensibilities is mourning jewelry, like
Mhm.
mourning. So it used to be the norm that when somebody passed away, you would commemorate them with a jewel. And in the Victorian era, and earlier, oftentimes this is like a locket that also has a lock of hair in it,
Mhm.
or in the mid 19th century, you'll even get some with post-mortem photographs because it wasn't easy to take a picture. You might not have got around to it
Mhm.
in 1870. So it wasn't considered macabre like it would be today. So I've gotten, just like an innocent looking locket and you open it up and there's a picture of a dead person in it.
Wow.
So yeah, so that's really interesting. And then also we get a lot of old rings with personal engravings on the inside, and some of them are just inside jokes from like there's one that sticks into my mind, and I would so love to know this story, but I never will. It just says like dot 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 my horse exclamation point. And it's from like 1897. And my my other colleagues were like, what did this ring mean? But anyway, history
That's the next
mystery.
book.
Yeah, yeah. My sophomore novel will be called dot 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 my horse.
Well, speaking of novels, getting back, what made you make this leap then from gemology and art and jewelry history to novelist?
I was inspired by that idea that we talked about earlier, and I don't know. I just thought this is gonna sound so cheesy, but I just believed I could in myself that I could do a good job at it if I
Mhm.
gave it enough time and energy. Um, so I was working on it on the side for most of it, and that also meant that there wasn't pressure because of course I always, the dream is something like this that oh my gosh, it's sold and I get to talk to wonderful people like you on podcasts about it. But because I wasn't depending on it for my financial stability, I was able to take as long as I needed. There was lots of periods of many months where I didn't pick it up or really I guess I was always thinking about it, but I didn't like actively work on it for a long
Mhm.
time. So it was really just a fun project for me that potentially had a big upside. So I guess I didn't feel like at the time I didn't feel like I was switching gears. It was kind of just like I was doing something else as well.
Did you find that those times when you were working on it were sort of relaxing for you? I feel like I hear that from a lot of authors with like the debut that have another full job that it's they start sort of writing for fun as relaxation on the side. Did you have that experience?
Yeah, yes and no. Like I think the for the early I love doing the research part, so that's very
Mm,
relaxing to me, like
yeah.
thinking about it. And my husband luckily is super nice about like chatting through plots and stuff. So it's fun to have these conversations about these imaginary things that could go anywhere. Um and then, there is also the work part about it, when it got more towards the end, I was thinking about querying agents, that's not relaxing, like researching that. And when you get to the point of like copy, you're like, oh, I wrote 400 pages and now I have to copy edit myself. Great. But yes, I absolutely the generative part of it was really fun, and I do think it's relaxing. Yeah.
There are definitely feminist themes at work in the novel, as there usually are when we talk about witches.
Yeah.
um, can you talk a little bit about what the situation was like for women during the 14th century and
Yeah.
how it also still applies today?
Sure. I mean, it was really in Italy, it was really restrictive. So there's certain roles that women are expected to play. There's a lot of, and those are wife and mother and household
Mm,
management, or nun is your other option. Um, and it would depend on, I think women at the higher end of the social hierarchy were probably the most restricted in terms of what there was allowances, for like, well, you have to make a living. So for people at the lower end of the spectrum. Um, but yeah, and we have the Catholic Church, or just the church at the time, and it was it was everything for people of it in Italy of that time. So all of the morality and the sort of challenges of meeting the expectations of the church, I think it was heavy for everybody in society, but especially for women. They were seen as responsible for mankind's expulsion from the Garden of Eden.
Mm.
So it was basically assumed that women were kind of um, evil and loose by nature, and it was up to society to help to not be ensnared by women that gave in to
Mhm.
those tendencies. So that's the backdrop. But of course, there's people are just living their lives, right? So women who lived in this time, not all of them believed this about themselves. Not all, and they not all men, I'm sure, believed it about women.
Mm.
Um, but it's hard to know because not there wasn't a big percentage of the population that was literate. And there's an even smaller percentage of the population of women that was literate. But we do have a few sources, and a couple more famous ones that I leaned on were the Book of Margery Kempe, which was written by an English mystic, and it's the earliest
Mm.
autobiography in English, actually, which is kind
Oh,
of cool
wow.
that it's from a woman
Mm.
and that we know about. That would be cool to find an earlier one. Um, see, rabbit hole. There you go. And the other one is the Book of the City of Ladies, which was written by Christine de Pizan, a French noblewoman. And if you read these, you can just see these women being like, why am I being treated like this? This is illogical. It's unhelpful. These uh, rude assumptions about women are not mirrored in the women I know in my life. It's not how I try to comport myself. So you see them writing it down. So I tried to take this and imagine that my main character, Ginevra, who comes from a poor background, so she doesn't necessarily know how to express herself. And when she's young, she doesn't know how to read or write at all, but she still has the sense of self-worth to realize that this isn't that she doesn't have to feel the way about herself that society tells her she should be. So I tried to listen to the ladies of that time as much as I was able to create a feminist character at a time before the concept of feminism really existed. And that was my approach to that.
Yeah, and she wants to be a doctor, right? You
Yes.
see, she wants to be a doctor in a time when that was not really possible for women, and therefore sort of becomes a healer in a different way, which puts her in
Yeah,
some danger.
absolutely. So there were at the time there was formal medical education and guilds of doctors, and it'd vary
Mm.
from city to city because there's not a centralized government at this point. And there would be women, as a rule, really weren't a part of these, although exceptions could be made for women who came from like a noble family of doctors. If some important gentleman decided that his daughter was his protege, they would be allowed to enter in certain circumstances. And women also were allowed to learn at the medical university in Salerno. But that being said, so the teachings of these universities were really based on um, classical medical knowledge, some of which was legit, some of which, like, maybe it's time to revisit these theories.
Mhm.
The theory of the four humors that I think many of us are a little bit familiar with, but basically the idea was you could if you had it's like when they decided they needed to bleed somebody or purge them
Um,
to balance their humors. So this doesn't work usually a lot. So anyway, what I'm saying is people would go to these legit doctors. Maybe they wouldn't be able to help them, or maybe they couldn't afford to go to these anyway. So there's a vast network of folk healers that are much more accessible to everybody. This could be men or women. And this is where Ginevra kind of falls. And she has this extra special ability, right, to use the powers of gemstones that not all folk healers even have access to. But the danger with this is if you are too successful, then you're going to become business competition
mm,
for the guild and also church officials. Again, if you're a woman, they really don't like to see women kind of asserting themselves because it bump in this healing field, it bumps up uncomfortably with like what is best left to the jurisdiction of God, to
Mm.
praying to the saints and the relics of saints, and what is really okay to claim you can do or to seek out. So this is kind of the nebulous world that my characters have to navigate through.
Have you always been a writer in some form? Have you always written fiction, or was this a newer thing?
I have not. I the closest analog is that for a long time I ran with a friend a series of like silly history lectures in bars here in Brooklyn where we would just like get up and anybody could come give a 15-minute PowerPoint presentation about whatever topic interested them.
Mm.
And it was well received. We ended up partnering with the Brooklyn Museum and Brooklyn Historical Society on some programming. So I knew that I could tell a story
Mhm.
in that sense. And I knew again, from my work that I had to write things before that were many, many pages long. And so I'm like, okay, I can at least be intelligible on the page. But I've always been a reader and
Mm.
loved books. And so I think just this familiarity with literature, probably even if I wasn't writing stuff down, it was definitely running through my brain somehow. Because yeah, here we go.
Do you consider yourself, as you were working, I know you said you would take it out and then put it away and work on it bit by bit, and you talked through some plot stuff with your husband. Do you really consider yourself a plotter or a pantser as you've worked on this novel?
Definitely a pantser for this one. Like I made spreadsheets. I did, but did I ever go back and look at them? Not really. The only one thing I did is I made a chronology of the historic. I made a timeline of like the actual historical events so
Uh,
that when I was building the plot, I would understand like how much time things needed to be happening and so that kind of anchored me in reality a little bit. But no, I definitely I would kind of write like as different scenes or chapters or moments would come to me more fully formed. And so if I was excited to write it, I would go for it and do my best on the first shot. And then once you have all those little points, came more of the scaffolding. So like the chapters where I knew what I wanted to happen, but I didn't know how to make it come alive yet. So you kind of just write the little summary to bridge you and come back to it later. But yeah, I should probably, that's why it took like a decade to write. So I should probably be a little more plotty for the next project.
well, what was the road to publication like for you?
Yes, okay. So my agent found me in the slush pile. So I think like most debut authors, I didn't have any connections in the publishing industry. So I just sent my little query letter off to I don't know, maybe 30 or something agents. And I had a number of positive responses. But the agent I ended up going with, I knew she had done really well for some other debut authors in a similar genre. So she came back to me and said, "This is good, but it needs a lot of work." And basically, we did kind of a gentleman's agreement that I wouldn't be pitching if
Mm.
while I focused on the edits that she recommended. So and I knew by the edits that she and her team gave me, I could tell they had like really read the story. I thought their advice made sense. And again, as a newcomer to this, I'm really receptive to what somebody with a lot of industry experience is telling me works. So that was again like another couple of months of working on that because at this time I was you're working full time. So and then Thank God, the edits worked, so we signed officially. And then there was more rounds of revisions, and then I once it went on submission, I was really lucky and like flabbergasted to have a number of serious offers. I want to say it was within 10 days or something like this. We went from meeting with
Wow.
editors to considering which offer we wanted to go with. So that was just wild. I couldn't believe. I still can't believe that that happened. But and then again, more revisions once you have your editor and all the fun stuff like figuring out the cover design and working with the marketing and publicity teams to put yourself out there. So it's been really wonderfully busy. And I think it'll be about a year and a half from signing
Wow.
with them to it coming out tomorrow. Yeah.
Speaking of marketing and publicity and putting yourself out there, what has that been like for you? I know you mentioned you've done a lot of public facing work, so you may not be as introverted as some writers might be, but what's that been like?
So I'm not, and I was speaking with my agent about this because she has all of us authors typed out. But the bucket I fall into is I'm definitely not an introvert, but I'm also not a salesperson. So while I love to talk to people and engage people and teach people,
Mhm.
I'm not very comfortable selling myself or my work. So that has been something I have done my best to get over. But definitely still like a thing because you're like, oh my gosh, I'm posting so much. People are gonna get so sick of hearing from me. So that and then that has been something that I think probably a lot of I think probably most authors are not natural sales people, if I had to hazard a guess. So I'm sure a lot of people can empathize with that. The other big thing has been social media. So as an elder millennial, Instagram is where I live and in my my comfort zone. And while I enjoy using it for fun, this has been the first time I've really had to kind of um, be very up in there with Instagram.
Mhm.
So it's been really wonderful to connect with so many people. That was something I hadn't anticipated, and I've made like real life friends from social media. Let me be the last person in the universe to make this discovery. Um, but I just have so much respect for people who do this as their full-time job, who are social media managers. It is so much work, and you have to be really on it, like ready to capitalize on stuff as soon as when the timing is right. So, yeah, I think those have been my biggest takeaways at this point. Yeah.
Have you gotten any great advice from your agent or team on how to overcome that feeling of not wanting to be salesy?
Um, that's a good question. I think just the best advice was people are happy to hear from you.
Mm-hmm.
People like to hear nice stories, and like the worst that they're gonna do really is just not care. No one's gonna be like, "Oh, you told me to buy your book and now I hate you." They're just gonna be like, "Okay, whatever," or they're gonna be like, "Cool, let me look into it more." So just realizing that you're really not, people can choose to opt out of hearing from you if they want. So you're really not annoying people as much as you feel like you might be.
What do you know now that you wish you had known going into this, publishing your first book?
Um, I think just how much work besides the writing of it
Mm.
goes into it. So there's just a whole team of people that as a reader I had never of course, you know they exist if you think about it, but there's just so many people with such specialized areas of expertise, and it's such a crowded market that it doesn't matter like how great your book is or how great your story is. There's just to get it in front of readers, you really need the help of people who know the industry. So I think that was probably the biggest learning for me, to just be ready to devote a significant amount of time to helping these people's efforts as much as you're able to.
Do you have any favorite piece of advice for aspiring authors?
Um, I I'm since I'm new, I get to start thinking about what I want my message to be. But for now it is, I think what we talked about earlier, like I just had an idea for a story that I thought was really cool. I didn't have a friend like slip my manuscript to anybody. So if that happened to me, then it can happen to you as well. And I think what people really just write what you love, because people like original perspectives. Like no matter what your thing you're trying to do is, writing or otherwise, if you have a unique take and a unique voice and you can really commit to it, people will recognize that. So I would say just stick to that, and be persistent, and hopefully good things will come.
Great advice. We have a traditional last question of the podcast, which is, when the Stone Witch of Florence is turned into a movie or series, what do you think the theme song should be?
The theme song, um, okay, this is kind of random, but I'm gonna go with March of the Zapotec by Beirut, because again, elder millennial here, but I feel like they do this really cool thing with horns, and I have no idea if it's actually medieval. I don't know if any of us really know what medieval music sounds like, but it sounds like what medieval music should sound like to me. So I feel like this is what I would go with.
Love it.
Did I do that right?
You did it perfectly.
Okay.
Anna Rasche, thank you so much for being here today. It has really been wonderful getting the opportunity to talk with you.
Thanks so much for taking the time. I'm glad to be here.
Thanks for joining us on Literary Prospects. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe and leave us a review. We'll see you next time.